Hi, thank you for being with me again today. Just got finished with a nice long drive in traffic, and I don't know if you like being in traffic, but you know, it sure is aggravating, and an opportunity though just to meditate a little bit and try to love your neighbor as you love yourself by letting people cut in front of you and not playing the gladiatorial battle of cars trying to merge. You know, today we had an 18-wheeler broken down on the entrance ramp down at I-30, had the traffic backed way up, and you know, we finally got up there and we did our merge dance and carried on. But you know, we've talked a little bit about being prepared and having society have long-term plans and not building things that just don't work, such as building in areas where hurricanes are going to hit, building things in lowlands that are going to flood, and of course building major metropolitan areas on top of active fault zones is another one of man's inabilities to plan for low probability but almost certain events to happen. So, you know, in Dallas, Texas, we're blessed to not be mostly at risk of flood, and we're very lucky to be far enough away from the coast that hurricanes don't do anything but bring us a nice big rain. So, but what are we doing about the traffic? We're just building nonstop with no end in sight and creating a situation where at any given moment traffic can back up for hours, and we can have clogs that are beyond the capacity of the road to handle. I don't know what the right answer to designing a sustainable, civilized city that doesn't have extreme delays due to traffic, but I know that we can't just build unlimited supplies of homes and apartment buildings without running into major structural issues on our highways. And I experienced that today. It took me a long time to get to the studio. We're filming in the late afternoon, and let me tell you, I didn't know when I was going to get to the studio. I got here a little late, and luckily there was a little bit of flexibility in the schedule so that I was able to tape today and not have to put it off to another day. But it is harrowing when you have this tremendous uncertainty in your travel plans where you don't know if a trip is going to take 15 minutes or an hour and a half. And any given little disruption or wreck or congestion can trigger this buildup. And as we know, of course, the most aggravating thing is what's called onlooker delay, where people going the other direction from a wreck or a stalled car all slow down so they can take a look at their fellow man's misfortune. You know, what is it about us that instead of just saying, oh, it's too bad that there's some congestion over there, I'm gonna just focus on being a safe driver going my direction, instead of rubbernecking around to see what in the world is going on the other side of the road. But that's human nature, and it's almost impossible for us to overcome. And even if we overcome it, the guy in front of us is gonna succumb to it and slow us down. So if you can think about it, two things that can make the world a little better place are to let people cut in front of you when lanes are merging. The other is to pay attention to the road and not be concerned about flashing lights going the other direction. Just let the first responders do their job and don't worry about what happened over there. It really doesn't affect you, because thank heaven it's on the other side of the divided highway, and you're going to be able to proceed safely home if you don't have a wreck because you're not paying attention to the road and looking over there at the wreck. So after an aggravating trip today, I guess I wanted to say a little bit about traffic. You know, it's a blessing in many ways to be in a growing, prosperous city that's very dynamic and has people pouring in on a daily basis. But there is a downside, and that downside is I do fear that we're going to get to a point of real gridlock that rivals cities like LA and New York, and other areas. So let's hope for a little bit of cooperation. Let's hope that we can get some regional planning in the Dallas area. Talk to your representatives, talk to your city council and other people and say, we'd like to have a common sense approach to controlling growth so that it doesn't strangle the city in traffic jams without end and in any direction at any time. So I don't know if that resonates with you. Maybe you don't get out on the highways all that often, but I know many people have long commutes because where they choose to live and send their kids to school is far away from their job, and they have very long commutes in hand. And I know that those people would like to see growth regulated in a way that doesn't turn their 30-minute commute into a 2-hour commute, which I'm afraid could happen if we keep expanding the city without limit and without any regulation. So let's all think a little bit about what is the right amount of growth and how can we have growth that doesn't strangle the infrastructure that was put in place. And of course, none of it is big enough for unlimited growth. So that's one of our issues that we have in Dallas, Texas, and other cities have that as well. One of the things that I'd like you to think about as a national policy is to have a national focus on diversifying our population centers and not going to this mega city complex, because the mega city is subsidized by rural and small town areas that provide raw materials and immigrating qualified workers into the major cities where job opportunities are high because it's a subsidized environment. The highways are subsidized. It costs you the same to drive on an urban freeway where the land value is $1 million an acre as it does out in the country where the land value is $3,000 an acre. So a short distance of road in the city is very expensive but very highly traveled. But the rural drivers and long distance truckers pay a large amount of the highway tax money that goes to subsidize city driving, which doesn't pay their fair share of the cost of driving. But I would love to see us have a plan in this country to encourage the development of cities of about 1 million or less that would be dynamic cities with all of the wonderful things, museums, good hospitals, schools, universities, etc., without the tendency of urban areas to go mega like the Dallas-Fort Worth area is, where it's becoming nearly 100 miles from east to west and 50 or 60 miles from north to south. A huge area of solid urbanization that is very difficult to get across and is in danger of strangling. There is an effect of traffic as population builds out and out, where the core of the city becomes extremely congested because of all the concentration surrounding it, converging on it, crushing the infrastructure of the city central, where people are trying to drive from one side of the city to the other. We really have an irrational system where people live so far from where they work and have to travel so far to the jobs, instead of the jobs being located closer to where people live and work, where they could have a short drive to work. So how can we combat that? It's a hard question, because in many cases in Dallas, the Dallas Independent School District is not considered to be that good a school district, and so people choose to live in distant suburbs to be in newer, more affluent school districts. that are filled with higher achieving children. So how do we solve these problems? That's a great question, and one that needs to be discussed at the policy-making level to try to come up with solutions that make sense. To me, the real answer is to put a regulatory cap on how far out development can occur from a city, how much farmland can be paved over before we say enough is enough. It's time to start building up another smaller city to handle the population growth of America. America is a growing country that has a growing number of people in it, and they need a place to live. But they don't all need to live in a mega metroplex like Dallas-Fort Worth. Dallas-Fort Worth, in my mind, doesn't need to go from 6 million to 10 million. It would be better for a town like Sherman-Denison to grow to be a town of 700,000 or 1 million and have some green space between it and the DFW area, rather than having development occur sequentially out to be a solid mass of population without decentralized urban features. So what would make an ideal sized town? You know, everybody remembers the town of their childhood, and frankly, Dallas, Texas was a far different place to live when the edge of town was basically LBJ and there was farmland just a little bit further north. I remember when at LBJ and the toll road, there were fields being farmed in that area, and it was still country places. Now you have to go another 25 miles to find that kind of density in the metroplex now. So would it have been better to say we're going to have a cap on development around Dallas and let the development go to other urban areas that weren't so big? Would it have been better? I think in many cases there's a strong case to say that it would be better. It would be better as far as being prepared for a disaster. If you have a diversification of population, if you move population away from the coast where there's a constant risk of hurricane and storms, and if you move away from mega cities that are totally dependent on just-in-time delivery of food and goods and gasoline and everything else, and if we went to a society that had more smaller cities that were scattered across the countryside. Just today, I was visiting with my engineer, and we were talking about North Korea and how today in the news, as is almost every day, there's bad news about North Korea, a country that clearly doesn't love its neighbor as itself and is representative of the devil's work here on earth. And what are we going to do about them? Well, one thing we could do is to spread ourselves out so that if there is a nuclear attack, it is not a catastrophic attack on one major metropolitan area that ends up crippling a large portion of America. We need to have redundancy, and part of redundancy is if we're diversified and spread out, we have better chances of being a sustainable society and surviving if we are attacked by somebody like North Korea in the future. So I've lived near small towns, and it's wonderful to be in a town where you can get where you need to go in 10 or 15 minutes. It's really hard. There's a lot of great things about being in a big city like Dallas, but it sure isn't much fun on a day like today when a lane is blocked on the highway and the traffic backs up incredibly. It all relies on everything working perfectly for it to even get there with a minimum of delay. But as we all know, the rush hour is getting longer. The time of clear roads is shrinking. why even on a Saturday or a Sunday, many roads are crowded because people are out trying to do shopping and other trips and aren't at work off the highways. So think about this when it comes election time, and as you think about what you want to encourage your representatives to work on, and read up a little bit if you'd like and find out. Now, you know, one of the things that I'm involved in is trying to help disadvantaged areas of Dallas become less disadvantaged so that they can attract more population back into these areas that are currently filled with vacant lots and abandoned homes. We could solve some of our traffic problems if people weren't scared to live in parts of the community. So the Greater Dallas Coalition, which sponsors the Dallas Champions Academy, is devoted to trying to make South Dallas a better place to live, so that instead of having a net migration out of it, there's a net migration into it, and it becomes a more vibrant, healthy part of the city. It's a shame that a city as affluent as Dallas, Texas, has crumbling roads, crumbling old schools, and very disadvantaged area, and more people living below the poverty line and children going hungry than most major metropolitan areas. And the Greater Dallas Coalition is trying to do something about that by helping small nonprofits work together to share resources and help combat these problems. Every few days I get an email from one member of the coalition saying, we have extra food, we have frozen food, we have shoes, we have a piano that needs a home. All these resources are shared among the 80 people that are on our email list that run nonprofits and small churches throughout the southern tier of Dallas. So I hope you'll go to the Greater Dallas Coalition website. I hope you'll donate to it and help its efforts and help it grow to be a larger, higher funding organization. And of course, we still want donations for the Dallas Champions Academy, which is doing year-round work helping disadvantaged youth. I don't know of a better way to make Dallas a greater place than to spread the good news and the affluence around the city and to help wipe out the blighted areas of the city that need our love and care, as Jesus commanded us to love our neighbors ourselves. So there's a lot to think about when we live in a city, and if you happen to live in the suburbs away from Dallas and think, well, I don't care about Dallas's problems, I live in Forney, I don't need to worry about Dallas. Well, you drive to Dallas, you benefit from Dallas services, and I wish you'd go to the Greater Dallas Coalition website and consider donating to help further your fellow man's faith. For the people in South Dallas are your neighbor, just like your neighbor down the street in Forney. They're still your fellow man, and you as a Christian need to do good works and love your fellow man by uplifting them and helping them break out of the cycle of poverty. One of the other things that I've been involved with, and I just went to a luncheon with the director of Educational First Steps, which I haven't talked about on the show much, but it's a cause that's doing wonderful things to help disadvantaged children. It's helping over 6,000 disadvantaged children in North Texas, ages 0 to 4, by converting poverty daycare centers into educational institutions as opposed to just custodial diaper changing facilities. So by changing the format and the approach of the daycare center into an educational center, we're able to stimulate the young mind of the disadvantaged child and help increase their vocabulary and their ability to be polite and stay focused on a lesson and interact well with their fellow students and others. So you can check out educationalfirststeps.org and learn more about that. It's a very exciting mission. You know, I love to have and talk about people that are doing good works to make the world a better place and to love their neighbor as their self, which is the second commandment that Christ teaches us. We've had some really good guests on here, and I've got some more guests coming. Today I didn't have a guest. I wanted to share a little bit of my thoughts on the world and got a little sidetracked talking about traffic because I just sat through a big dose of it, and I realized that maybe you haven't thought about traffic as an alternative to things, but much traffic is caused by human behavior doing things that aren't according to the way cars ought to be driven if they were driven rationally. We need to allow room for people to merge. We need to not all bunch up as tight as we can and then have to wait until the car in front of us goes 20 or 30 feet before we can go. The traffic carrying capacity of roads is far higher theoretically than what is actually achieved because drivers don't drive sensibly and rationally. So when you're out in traffic, think about giving yourself a little more room from the car in front of you so that if somebody needs to merge, if a lane closes or there's a car blockage or whatever it is, that you can merge without having to slam on your brakes and triggering what I call the reverse velocity wave, which is everybody running so close together that when one guy hits his brakes, the guy behind him has to hit his brakes harder, and the guy behind him has to hit his brakes even harder, and pretty soon a guy has to come to a full stop when the guy at the head of the line just slowed down from 50 to 45. But because everybody's stacked together so tightly, everybody stops faster as they go back in the line, and eventually you come to a dead stop, and then the traffic piles up behind you in a dead stop, and there hadn't been anything wrong on the road except some guy who was tailgating the guy in front of him, slamming on his brakes and triggering this reverse velocity wave that ends up with the highway coming to a full stop. Now, you've all been on these roads that do what they call the centipede, where the traffic goes whoosh, and then it comes to a dead stop, and it sits there for a while, and then it goes again. You go a mile or so, and you come to another dead stop. Well, that's all caused by people following too closely and hitting their brakes too much. So, because I'm out on the roads with you, I wish we could all drive like we should, which is to give following distance, give cushion, and be able to slow down gradually without even using our brakes when the traffic in front of us slows. That'll also save you money on car repairs and get you better gas mileage. So a win-win if we could all do that. The irony of things is if we go to autonomous vehicles, which everybody's working to do, driverless cars will actually allow the roads to empty out because they'll drive according to an algorithm of giving space between the cars, having seamless merging, and other things that will drive the way people ought to drive because it'll be programmed into the cars to function well. We're a long way away from having driverless cars, but in some ways I'm a little concerned about the idea of them, but I think the good news is it could really solve our traffic problems by having cars drive rationally instead of rashly. So when you're out on the road, drive like Jesus is driving. Let people merge in. Give room around your fellow man. Don't cut in and out of lanes, chewing up, trying to dogfight into the best position you can be in. Love your neighbor by driving in a Christian way, which is to loving the fellow driver, giving people entrance room when they get on the highway and room to change lanes to go ahead and exit. Of course, driver's ed teaches get over in the lane, in the right lane when you're getting ready to exit, ahead of your exit. Don't wait till the last minute and be in the left lane and cut across traffic in a precipitous way to get over to the exit ramp that you weren't prepared for. So be prepared and drive defensively, live defensively, and love your neighbors yourself. Help these organizations that are out to do good works, and your life will be a less stressful, more joyful life, because the joy in life really comes from helping others and sharing and carrying your abundance with your fellow man, so that you build goodwill on earth and treasure in heaven. So as you drive home in the following week, give it a try to just take it a little easy, de-stress a little bit. Don't worry about being late. Leave a little extra early where you have a little time, and you won't be stressed like I was stressed today when I was running late because I didn't have quite enough time to account for a stalled truck on the entrance ramp of a major highway that I was trying to get on. So I hope you have a great week, and we'll be back with some exciting guests in the upcoming weeks, and I hope you'll tune in to see us and look at my previous shows on the internet, available on demand. Love to have you review what we've done. We've got some interesting shows, and I don't always go into a monologue. I oftentimes have wonderful guests on, and I'm looking forward to having guests on in the near future. I hope you have a great week and enjoy good worship on Sunday, and we will all be better if we can love one another and live in peace and harmony. We know that if the world was not run by the devil and filled with people who weren't Christ followers, we would have a much more harmonious, wonderful world. And share the good news of Christ, and the best way to share it is by living it and going on. Please do go to the websites, to the Dallas Champions Academy. We desperately need a broader base of funding, and we'd love to see you back again next week.